Hello, everybody. Um, Thanks for coming to check this out. Um, Thank you, Nathan, for inviting me to do this. And today I want to talk about uh, some topics from my book, uh, How to Improvise Over Chord Changes. Now, what this book is, it's a systematic approach that focuses on blues, rhythm changes, minor blues, and bird blues. And it presents concepts that have simplified versions, intermediate versions, and advanced versions. So anyone can get in any chapter. It starts with a primer chapter, which gives some basic theoretical information to get people up to speed. It gets right in with some riff-based improvisation in the next chapter, and then starts dealing with chord scales and arpeggios, uh, voice leading, in particular focusing on thirds and sevenths. It deals with chromaticism and um, other concepts related to improvisation. Now there are some original concepts that that teach the concepts, or I'm sorry, that teach the. There are some original approaches to teaching fundamental improvisation concepts that focus on bebop. Um, uh, for instance, one of the concepts in the book is what I call diatonic transposition, and it's where you take an exercise, or you take a group of notes, a melody, a motif, and you take that same group of notes and you work them through a set of chord changes, and you're only moving by notes that are changed when you go to a new tonality. So you're saying in sort of the same range, but the shape continues to sort of, you recognize the shape, but it's also malleable enough to adjust to each tonality. So I'm sorry. So I'm going to play a little bit of that right now here. I'm going to share my screen. And let's see here. I'm going to play along with this here. And all right, actually, before I do that, I'm actually supposed to do something else. Let me do that. All right, here we go. Okay, here we go. Let's try that again. Okay, so that was diatonic transposition. That was uh, one of the first exercises, And that exercise, so again, was over B flat blues. You couldn't hear the backing track?
I could initially, but once you did the volume adjustment, I couldn't.
I see.
I don't know if anybody else had that issue. Maybe that was just me, but I just wanted to let you know. Oh, okay. We got a comment that said I heard it both times. That was just me.
Okay, all right.
Sorry.
So let's see here. So can we all hear the keyboard? Put a thumbs up. Great. So the idea with that exercise so you can see how the line is staying in the same area, but you can also hear how when the chords change, the line still fits the chord changes. All right, now this is a very common thing that you hear in improvisation. And so there's a number of exercises that I have in the book that exploit that concept. So here, let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's see here. All right, so this is the book. Let's see here. And like I was talking about, this is the primer chapter, so there's some, some basic information. And like I said, this riff-based improvisation there. Okay, here we go. Here's diatonic transposition. So let me get to the next one. So where it says transposition study number 1. So that's what that is on the left page there, page 36. And you can see that that concept sort of turns into a more of a scalar exercise. And then you can do that exercise. Right? Or you can alternate. Now, actually, each exercise sort of also implies starting on different notes, so you don't necessarily have to start. You know, you could start. You know, so you can make each one of the exercises more challenging, and they get more developed. So one of the exercises, for instance, So there's different exercises. They get more challenging. And you see this concept review thing on page 39. Yeah. So that's one of the original concepts that's in the book. But the book also, like I said, it also addresses. Let me stop sharing here. It also addresses things that are, ubiquitous, things like chord scales, arpeggios, thirds and sevenths, and there's exercises that are written out to help to navigate, um, those ideas. And thirds and sevenths in arpeggios are laid out in such a way that it sets up treating those notes as target notes, so that when we start talking about chromaticism, you have good anchor points and you've sort of solidified in your fingers, but then also in your ear, you're solidified where those thirds and sevenths are, where those anchor points are, where those arpeggio notes are. So typically if I play a half step away from one of those notes, that's going to be a chromatic passing tone. So then it sort of sets you up for success with chromaticism. So I've played a couple of these exercises on my Instagram, and so I thought that that could be a relatively efficient way to, let's see here, play a couple of these examples. Now, where did it go? Okay, it's because it's minimized. Okay. Okay, yeah, there we go. Let's see. All right. Now I'm gonna have to hunt a little bit because it's been a minute. Let's see here. Let's see here. What is this? That's not it. Sorry, this is so clunky. Hold up. Okay, so here's one of the exercises. I think that's going through the wrong speakers. Hold up here. Okay, let's see if this is better. Wait a minute. Is it? Can everybody hear that? Thumbs up if you can hear it. Thumbs up if you can hear it. Let's see here. Let's see. All right. So I think that was the same exercise that I just played. I've got... Let's see here. All right. see here. I should have marked this. Let's see here. What is this? Nope, that's not it. I think I'm about to give up on this. Wait a minute, what is that? No, that ain't it. Okay, I'm just about to give up. Yeah, that's more recent than I want. Okay. Well, instead of that, I think I'll play a couple exercises and then I'll do some improvising and I'll try to incorporate some of the ideas. Let's see here. So one of the concepts that's in the book is something that I call the 8 ways to play a pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a pentatonic scale, a minor pentatonic scale, and I'm going to play a common pattern, and then I'm going to play the other 7 ways to play the pattern. So here's the first way. So that's the first way to play the pattern. The second way is retrograde. So it's just to reverse the order of the notes. Okay. The third way is inverted ascending. Fourth way is inverted retrograde. Okay, so that's the fourth way. The fifth way is alternating ascending. And then the next way is alternating retrograde. Then you have inverted alternating ascending. And then inverted alternating retrograde. So basically, that gives you 8 ways to play any pattern that you may think that you're totally familiar with. That's going to expand. It's going to expand facility on the instrument. It's going to give you and suggest different ideas. So if you understand, a certain tonality or a certain scale to chord relationship, then you can start working out several of these kinds of ideas. And I mean, all it really takes is 1 or 2 of these ideas where you can play all of those different ways and have facility in every key, and that's a lot of material. So the 8 ways to play a pattern. Now I'm going to do the 8 ways to play a pattern. I'm going to play it now in a way that it's not in the book, but the concept would work for any kind of tonality, any kind of pattern, you know, any kind of scale. It can be harmonized any way that you want to. So this is a common pattern that you hear in jazz. Um, all right, very common pattern. So one more time. All right. So the retrograde version would be. Right? And then the third way to play the pattern would be. Fourth way. Let's see. Uh, let's see. And then you have alternating. And then you have the other versions. Uh, yeah. So, you know, and you have three transpositions of that because since that was diminished. But, you know, any of those patterns, I mean, I took a pattern that is ubiquitous, something that's is commonly used, played all the time. There's a lot of tradition for it. A lot of great jazz improvisers have used that pattern. And then I turned it into a bunch of stuff that almost nobody plays. Um, I'll do that with one other pattern. So this is, let's see, what pattern is this? Let's see here. So this is fourths. This is a diminished pattern again, but it's fourths down in minor thirds. So. Okay, so that's the bass. So next thing is retrograde. All right, then uh, uh, so, uh, okay, so let me do that over. Let me do it again. Uh, 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 let's see, and then you've got. All right. So anyhow, the 8 ways to play a pattern. Yeah, and then here, let me. I just want to do a little bit of playing, and then maybe you can open it up for some questions. Let's see here. And one other thing I wanted to talk about just briefly is what I call a canvas approach to improvising. And this is usually the first thing that I discuss when I'm teaching improvisation, is to get people playing. And it doesn't require that there's like a deep knowledge of chord scale theory and any of that. So you can play a minor pentatonic, and minor pentatonic, uh, if we're in B flat concert right now, is B flat, D flat, uh, E flat, F, A flat, B flat. All right, that's minor pentatonic. So I'm going to improvise using just those notes over the form. So let's do that. So 5 notes. That was 5 notes. And you can add another note to that for the blues scale. So you're going to add the sharp 11. So it's going to be B flat, D flat, E natural, F, A flat. Okay, so it's 6 notes. So I'll do the same thing. All right. Um, I mean, I could play some more or talk some more, but I think I talked a little bit enough, or I talked enough about this. If there's any questions, uh, maybe I can I can answer some questions. Well, while I'm waiting for some questions, now with the book, like I said, it provides this material for the blues, but also for minor blues, bird blues, and for rhythm changes. And I think it makes it a great um, a beginner to intermediate resource. It's a text that I've been using in the improvisation sequence at Ohio State, and in my applied lesson teaching. And concepts that are out of the book are concepts um, that I had been teaching prior to, um, you know, working at Ohio State and teaching college students. Those concepts that I was high school students and and professionals alike that were taking lessons with me. Many of the concepts were developed there and then further codified in my studio at Ohio State. So, oh sure, yeah, we can definitely can talk about that. Evan is asking, can you talk about how you've chosen licks for your Hot Licks series? Um, yeah. So, uh, I'll give you a little bit of history on that first, and then I'll kind of talk about um, what the process is like, day to day. So, um, so I sort of, with the marketing of my website, I decided to sort of rebrand some things, and I had an Instagram, um, and I changed the Instagram to match the website, Dr. Thunder Music, and I wanted to have some regular content that wasn't, produced or, you know, um, particularly time consuming to generate, something that I could do consistently, something that could show maybe some versatility, and hopefully get some more followers on Instagram, because I know that a lot of students, most of the students that we're going to be recruiting to go to college, they're going to tend to be on Instagram rather than being on Facebook. And Facebook is great, but I mean, if you talk to kids, they'll tell you that Facebook is for their parents. Um, and of course, I have a Facebook, but Instagram is great. But actually now, and I started doing the same thing with TikTok. I started duplicating content that I have on Instagram. I started to put it on TikTok, and because that platform is actually bigger, quite a bit bigger than it's bigger than Facebook, which is bigger than and it's bigger than Instagram. Um, so and it's a lot bigger, and it's growing in size quickly. So short clips, that's what goes on TikTok, tends to be very short, punchy videos, all kinds of different things. And so the hot licks were kind of ideal for TikTok also. So I started uploading those there too. So, but anyhow, how I choose what stuff to play, I'm choosing a variety of different things, and where I am on each instrument is different. I've been playing saxophone the longest. Um, Flute is very close. Flute's very close, is a very close second, and then clarinet, and you know, bass I didn't start playing until 2005. Keyboard I started playing after my master's degree was finished in 2001, and then I started playing guitar about 6 years ago. So that's sort of the order of the instruments, and so the different instruments are in different they're in different places as far as development goes. And so the kinds of things that I'm going to think of to play on guitar are necessarily going to be different than on saxophone or on clarinet or on flute or something. And so basically I give myself about 30 minutes to film, and it's a spontaneous event. So I'm thinking about what it is that I want to play. Sometimes earlier in the day, something will occur to me, but most of the time, when I come and I sit down, I don't have anything in particular on my mind, and so I have to come up with something. And of course, a lot of the lines are things that I play. I'm not sort of grabbing stuff out of thin air, but yeah, and the first 50 that I did, you know, that was it was great. It was fine. It still is fine. I still don't feel like I can't come up with something. I have to listen periodically to make sure I'm not repeating myself. Um, but the first 50 was a lot of sort of internal motivation to keep me doing it every day. I was getting good feedback, but anything that you have to do day in, day out can become a little monotonous. And so I had to really stay on it and make sure I was doing it. And then after about 50, then people started to expect me to do it every day. And so that kind of helps to keep the momentum going. My goal with these is to get to 365. You know, and that'll be a few days shorter than a year because there's been a couple days where I've done more than one. But that's the idea. And also, when I started doing those videos, those hot lick videos, I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I just wanted to have some regular content. And then when I started getting a lot of positive feedback, then I started to have them transcribed, and there are PDF files on my website. And my website's drthundermusic.com, and it's easy to find where the hot licks are on the. So far, I have 125 of them available, and yeah, so that's that. I don't have a PDF copy of my book. That PDF that I have it's actually before the book was. There was some edits and mistakes in it. It was something that Hal Leonard sent me to say, hey, this is what we have. Make your comments and your edits. And so I have that only for that reason. But no, there is no PDF version of the book. You can get it on Amazon though, and you can just search for it on Amazon, or you can go to my website, drthundermusic.com, and I think it's under. Let's see here. I think it's under about. Yeah, it's under the media tab. There's a drop-down menu on the front page, and it says book. Then you just go to the link there. Okay, so I got a couple more questions here. Um, does the instrument determine the solo? The solo you might play on sax, would you play the same thing if you were playing the flute, or would it likely be different? I'm very influenced by sound. Um, so flute sounds different than saxophone. Also, the technique associated with playing flute facilitates more easily things like double, triple tonguing, flutter tonguing. There's just certain things that are sort of indigenous, to the instrument, let alone the different range flute has. Um, than, say, for instance, tenor saxophone or something. Tenor can go lower. I mean, there's no real cap on how high tenor can play, or how high flute can play, for that matter. Um, um, but uh, but as far as having more range, uh, my speaking voice is more of tenor, more tenor saxophone kind of range. So that may suggest certain things to me on tenor more than it suggests on flute, and vice versa. But theoretically, I mean, you can play the same ideas. You just have to find a different way to play them. The physics of the instrument sort of make certain decisions for you, but you can overcome whatever the limitations are. I played with this pan flute player named Damian Dragici. Is Romanian, and there's a video of him playing Donnelly with Eddie Daniels on YouTube, and this guy plays the most ridiculous and incredible stuff on this pan flute. Like, you're not supposed to be able to play like any of the stuff that he plays. But if you want to be impressed by someone that's doing a lot of acrobatics while playing, really great bebop lines on pan flute, that would be a good one to check out. Damian Dragici. Let's see here. So this one's from that last one was from Peyton Clark. This next one is from Jacob Soto. So hi Shawn, I was wondering how you make your blues solos a little more diverse and interesting instead of just using the pentatonic and blues scale. Well, that without sounding like I'm trying to sell something, that's kind of what the book is about. It starts there. It starts with minor pentatonic and blues scales, but then it goes from there all the way to talking about whole tone, diminished, augmented. There's a chapter on triad pairs, and all of the concepts are worked out over, like I said, blues, minor blues, bird blues, and rhythm changes. Which all of those forms, I picked those intentionally because they're very common forms. Blues and rhythm changes are their most commonly contrafacted forms. But I guess without going into all of the detail, I think one thing is you also want to be listening. You got to listen, to the tradition. If I'm trying to, for instance, if I'm trying to develop a stronger classical saxophone concept, and I'm playing, maybe I'm playing Desanglo or something, then it's a good idea to listen to some other players play that, some definitive versions of that, and you can draw inspiration from the different ways that they do things. And there'll be some things that you like about how they do it and some things you don't, and you can make those decisions. But you don't want to sort of I don't know. I guess you could try to play through something without having listened to somebody first, but then you probably should start consulting recordings. And in jazz, I think the oral tradition is so important, that listening, a lot of listening, transcribing, figure out what people are playing. What is Charlie Parker playing on a 251? Figure out what Eddie's playing. Copy it. Force yourself to play it in the same context. Learn it in all keys. Practice it with a metronome. All of those kind of things are going to help. As far as the sort of fundamentals of improvising, and like what is the material that you need, that stuff is all in. It's all in my book. Let's see here. Ingrid Lee, as a classical and jazz saxophonist, how do you plan out your daily practice schedule? Oh, this is great. So I have a 6-year-old, and I have a lot of responsibilities. I'm married. I have a mortgage. I'm the director of jazz studies at Ohio State, and I'm the minister of music at Second Baptist Church. And I'm trying to keep my online content coming, and writing music, and all of these activities. Before this quarantine, I was in the gym 5 days a week. So I'm pretty active. Now, having all that stuff to do doesn't sort of leave, unlimited time to practice. And something that I talk to my students about, or I regularly do, like if I'm doing a presentation, is I'll I'll ask people to raise their hand if they have unlimited time, and I try to get them to raise their hand. Come on, somebody in here has unlimited time. Come on, come on. You know, Of course, none of us have unlimited time. So, being really, you have to guard your practice time. Um, when people are in school, in college, I always tell them, this is the time that you're going to have the most to practice. You're going to have the most time to practice when you're in college. And it's going to have to go down, because no longer is it about improving yourself in learning and all of that. It's about paying bills, and that has to be the primary consideration. And so everybody gets a piece of your time. So as far as my basic breaking up of my practicing, I have sort of rudiments and things that I practice that are universal. Finger technique, kinds of exercises, scales and all keys, different patterns, based on scales. I could take, in one practice session, I could take like a pattern and play the 8 ways to play a pattern, and take 2 of those ways that I develop and work those out in every key or something. All of that kind of stuff that's universal stuff. That doesn't belong to jazz or classical. That's just, I tell my students all the time, if you can't play your instrument, then you can't play jazz. I don't know why it is, but some folks have convinced themselves that pursuing jazz, for instance, means that you don't have to be able to play your instrument. You can kind of get away with stuff. And I think that's what their playing sounds like too, is that they're getting away from with stuff. So if you really want to play jazz well, then you have to really be able to play your instrument well. And so all of this sort of fundamental rudiments and all that kind of stuff. Then I'll get into real specific stuff, and that tends to be more project oriented. So if I'm going to play a recital, then I'll be working on a classical recital. Then my practice time will be, sort of focused on that material. If I'm about to play, if I'm about to go on tour with the Count Basie Orchestra or something, well, actually, unfortunately, you don't get to keep that music. So I'll listen and I'll work on, I don't know, I might work on a particular tune that I know we're going to have to play. So that band plays a lot of really up-tempo tunes and some rhythm changes, and I always have like a feature on like a rhythm changes. And so I might spend a lot of time, playing tempos, in particular playing tempos on rhythm changes, because I want to be ready for that. One of the bands that I play in, the Ohio Jazz Tet, which is the faculty group at Ohio State, I have programmed that band to be very progressive. So it's a lot of music by new composers, by modern composers. Excuse me. And a lot of that music is very technical and very challenging. And so it means I have to practice to be able to play it. So I like to sort of force myself to practice by programming challenging stuff. I can play, I don't want this to sound like I'm tooting my horn or something, but I can play already. I can play in every key. I can, play all over the instrument. And so, as far as like facility and being able to play rudiments and stuff, I can do that already. Now, I'm always working on something new and trying to challenge myself in a new way. But if I feel like a certain rudiment or something is just, I'm starting to lose something, then I'll go back and I'll spend time on that. But for the most part, I'm trying to continue to work on things that are challenging and for the most part, the way that I do that is by putting myself in challenging situations where I have to play music that I don't know. Um, I play in the Columbus Jazz Orchestra, and that's always a fun band. It's the music is always pretty challenging, and and I play in different chairs depending on what they need me to do. For the last couple of years, mostly I've been playing Barry in that band, but I've played every chair in that band except for lead alto. And I played with Dr. Bunty, who's in the room right now, with the CSO. And so having good reading chops and all that kind of stuff, being in situations where I'm having to read music a lot, that really, it's beneficial. It really helps. Any other questions? Okay, Ingrid, how can I work on internalizing a certain lick? Yeah, that's like the $100 question. Or, um, yeah, maybe it's worth more than $100. That's a challenging thing. Mostly it's challenging because uh, we're impatient. I'm impatient. All of us are impatient to, um, you hear something that you like or whatever, and you say, "Oh, I want to play that." I dig that. And you start practicing it, and you play it over and over and over, and still it's like, man, it's still not coming out of the horn. Like, and it's not coming out in like the spontaneous way I want it to come out, right? Where I'm not really thinking about it, and it just comes out just right, and it feels fresh and organic and all of that. Um, it's a challenging thing. So, Charlie Parker famously said, "Learn all you can and forget it all." And he's not suggesting that you forget things that you work on, but what he is suggesting is that you can't, tightly hold on to things. You have to hold them loosely, because if you're really holding on to something really tightly, you're never going to actually play it. And if you do play it, it won't sound organic. So you have to like trust the process. I'll give you an example. Um, there's a book by Oliver Nelson called Patterns for Jazz Improvisation. It's a very you know commonly referenced resource. It's a great book. Um, but that book doesn't really give you like chord symbols or any of that. It's just a bunch of patterns. But they're very they're interesting patterns. Um, some of them are common patterns, and they're sort of written out in kind of in every key or whatever the pattern suggests. So some things might be written out in whole steps or something, so you don't necessarily get all the keys. But that book, for a year and a half, and this is years and years and years ago. This was when I was in my 20s, um, early 20s. For a year and a half, I played that book cover to cover as a warm up. Took me about 35 minutes to do cover to cover as a warm up for a year and a half, every day. And I never tried to place the lines. I never tried to say, okay, well, this line here, this would fit good on a 2-5-1, or this one right here, what if I played that on a major 7 sharp 11 chord? I didn't. That's not what I did with it. I just used it as a facility builder, and every time I'm playing my instrument, my ears are open, like I'm paying attention to what it is that I'm playing. I'm listening, and so although it was meant to be like a facility builder for me, it also was getting in my ear. And to this day, often when I think I have invented a new line or a new pattern, it's it's a pattern that's out of that book, from that book. And so I've successfully, forgotten, forgotten it all. And so now the stuff comes back. But that's like, 20, 20, 20 plus years. So you have to be patient and allow things to happen. Now, I'm not suggesting that you have to wait 20 years for it to happen. But what I am saying is, you may have to wait longer than you want to. I like to always have something old that I'm practicing, that I'm working on, and something new, and then something that I'm still sort of refining. So I might be able to play something proficiently, but it's slow. So that'll be something that I'll be speeding up. I like to be looking at something new, and I like to take something old, to find something old that I used to play, and bring that back. And I try to have those three things kind of going all the time. And yeah, I hope that helped. Anyone else have a question? Let's get like one or two more questions, and I think we can. I think that'll be our time. I did want to talk about, briefly, while I'm waiting for the last question, about this interview series that I've been doing called the Quarantine Interviews. Um, the latest interview that I did was with Antoine Roney. Antoine Roney is the brother. He's the brother of Wallace Roney. Wallace just passed away from the coronavirus. But Wallace was a really important and influential jazz trumpeter, and he, yeah, so he passed away. But the interview I did with Antoine, we talked about that, but we talked about other topics, and that's how that interview series tends to go. Is we talk about all kinds of different things, but we have been talking about like what people practice, and what got them into music, and early mentors and teachers that they had, and we go through a lot of that kind of stuff. But that was episode 34 with Antoine Roney. Tonight I've got an interview, and that'll be episode 35. And upcoming interviews that I have are, I've got one with Joey DeFrancesco coming up. I've got an interview with Antonio Hart. I can't think of them all. There's about 15 more that are scheduled, but it's all notables. So please check that out. The Quarantine Interviews. If you just search for that on YouTube, the Quarantine Interviews, you'd be able to find it. But there's also a link on my website. Then the hot lick videos, I've been doing those, and like I said, you can go to my website, and you can, if you want to support my work, you can do it that way. And let's see here. Oh, and I released a classical CD project. It's all Marcel Mule commissioned pieces, and that was released in January 2020, so it was this year. And yeah, so you can check that out. That's on SoundCloud. It's on my SoundCloud. My SoundCloud is Dr. Thunder Music, all one word. And yeah, so here, let me get this last question. Let's see. Oh yeah. So bird blues is a blues progression where uh, Charlie Parker is basically conflating confirmation, his composition confirmation, and a standard blues. Um, I cover that form in my book. Um, Maybe if you want to send me a message later or something, I can try to get you some more information. And then, who's one player whose sound and playing that you admire more than others? Well, my two biggest influences are Sonny Stitt and John Coltrane. Those have been my two biggest influences, and I hear them every when I play, when I want to or not. They've been very very um, uh, influential. Tips on pitch bending. Yeah. So so uh, so technically, I'm going e o e. I mean, one thing that you could work on is you could play like diatonically, so all the bends wouldn't be a whole step. So so you know with these earphones in, I'm not sure how close my pitch was on everything, but uh, bending something down is much less challenging than trying to bring the pitch up. You can't really go up very much. Um, but yeah, but ee, that's what I'm doing to uh, do that. Ooh 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 is the lower, ooh, and e is the higher note. Um, and I think that, oh no, there's one more question. Um, let's see here. That question is: do you have a saxophone that you prefer for worship or gospel? Um, so, so I think what you're asking is uh, alto versus tenor versus soprano or something, and the answer is that alto saxophone, um, that is the more common voice in a gospel setting. It cuts through better. Um, there's there's a certain aesthetic and a powerful kind of aesthetic that's less challenging to generate on alto than on like tenor. Um, that's not to say that I've never played tenor in that setting or soprano. I've done all three. I definitely prefer alto, and it just allows for more. Um, I mean, I can cut through. Um, I can match whatever the lead vocal part is going to be. Um, as far as intensity. Um, I mean, you can do it on tenor also. But there's just a certain range on alto that just cuts through better. So so I'm gonna go with alto. Oh, tips for young musicians. Um, yeah, so folks that want to go into music. Well, the first thing is, if you want to go into music, then you got to really want to go in music. Like, it shouldn't really be like an experiment, you know. And I don't want to make this sound. I don't want to be negative, but there are a lot of great musicians um, uh, that are that can't make a living. You know, they play as well as anybody you can imagine, and they're not making a living playing music. and it's just because the business is tough. It's a rough business. It's really challenging, and you have to be willing to do a lot of stuff. You have to have a diverse skill set, and you have to be willing to do what other people won't do. Um, um, and we usually associate success in music with hours practiced, but that's just not the case. Yeah, hours practiced is very important, and if you're not willing to do that, then music is probably not a good idea. But there's there's the music industry. There's the business of music. There's marketing. There's you know having an agent and a manager. There's websites and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and TikTok and composing and arranging and there's teaching. There's so many aspects of music and being a great musician and being able to make a living doing music. People often ask me, say, man, how many instruments do you play? It's like, yeah, I play a lot of instruments, and I play them well enough to actually gig on them. All of the instruments that I play. But I'm not just doing that because, just to do it, or just to try to impress somebody, or just to, I play a bunch of instruments. I'm doing it because I'm trying to work. And, I do what it takes to work. If you want to work, sometimes you got to do other stuff. So if you love music to that extent, then I think, and you have, enough natural ability to make it, then yeah, I think it's. I'm stuck with music. I can't imagine doing anything except for music. It's the only thing I ever wanted to do. I would be absolutely miserable without it, and I think it takes that. If you wouldn't be miserable without it, then maybe doing something else is a better idea for a living. You could still play music. You could still, but anyhow, I digress. But having a teacher, I think, is really important, and getting a teacher that actually knows the business and isn't going to just teach you how to play the instrument, but that's also going to have information about other aspects of the music industry. I think that would be important. But getting a teacher, doing what the teacher says, spending a lot of time practicing, being willing to say no, to other stuff. Music has to be the priority. The more time that you spend when you're younger, the closer you can get to that 10,000 hour mark that that we talk about so often. So anyhow, all right. Well, I think that's it. Unless I get another question. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Sorry for the clunkiness in the beginning of the presentation. I've done a bunch of these, a lot of Zoom sessions, but it's just, it's not like doing it in person. Have a good one.